Welcome to the Power in Motion podcast, the show for women who want to develop a kinder relationship with their body so you can feel healthy, happy, and confident without restricting food, doing torturous exercise, or constantly worrying about the number on the scale. I'm your host, Kim Hagel, size-inclusive fitness specialist and certified non-diet health and life coach specializing in body image. This podcast is here to provide weight-neutral, health at every size aligned information and coaching on sustainable habits and mindset shifts so you can feel your very best in the body you have right now. Let's lace up our runners and go for a walk while we chat. Hey, friend, and welcome to the Joyful Movement Show. Did that clickbait title get you? You're probably wondering why on earth would I name an episode of the Joyful Movement Show Joyful Movement. And by the way, this episode is explicit. So if you've got young ears around, this would be a good one to listen to with earbuds in. So why fuck Joyful Movement? Well, this episode was actually born out of a conversation that I had with my dear friend and colleague, Vanessa Preston. You might remember her. She was on the show last fall on episode 36 called Managing the Not Good Enough Voice. And we were chatting one night as friends about how she was consciously working to change her relationship to exercise from punitive, competitive, and all or nothing to embracing joyful movement. But she was getting tripped up in finding that the joy just wasn't happening. And in fact, she was experiencing a lot of anger towards movement and confusion about how to proceed in her movement practice and pressure to find movement joyful. And because she didn't, it was activating the not good enough voice. So that led to a lot of back and forth between us. And also we got some of our other non-diet fitness friends involved in this conversation. And as we started talking and sharing about our own journeys and those of our clients, we came to realize how loosely we use the term joyful movement, but that it can hold so much meaning. And there's so many nuances behind it. I mean, on the surface, it can sound to someone who's new to the idea like exercise should be this blissed out experience where we feel on top of the world, like the runner's high all the time. And it's really just simply not like that all of the time, not even for those of us in the fitness industry. So Vanessa adopted the catchphrase, fuck joyful movement, as we were having these conversations. And then invited all of us to get together to have a panel discussion about what it means to each of us, what fuck joyful movement means to each of us, and how we can instead engage with exercise and still work towards consistency, even if it's not exactly joyful, and how taking a more neutral, grateful, and intentional approach could be a good bridge between hateful exercise and joyful movement. So, on this episode, I'm joined by Vanessa Preston, who is a mental health social worker and psychotherapist with expertise in working with clients who have experienced post-traumatic stress disorder and complex trauma. And she has a strong interest in the intersection between trauma and body image. And then Jolynn Martin is also with us today, and she's been on the show before, back in episode 40. She is a certified personal trainer, group fitness instructor, and intuitive eating and body image coach, and she's passionate about helping other moms heal their relationship with food, body, and exercise. And also, Stephanie Bender is with us today. She's new to the show. She is another non-diet personal training colleague. So this episode's actually going to be airing on Vanessa's show, the Body and Food Freedom podcast, and Jolynn's podcast, the Non-Diet Mom Show, which are two podcasts that I definitely recommend that you listen to as well. And all of our guests' social handles, websites, and resources, they're all linked up in the show notes that you can check out after. So enough from me. Let's jump right into the good stuff.
Hi, everyone. So I thought we would start by introducing who's here today chatting with you. So if you're new to me, my name is Vanessa Preston. I'm the host of the Body and Food Freedom podcast. And you can find me at Vanessa_Preston_ on Instagram.
And I'm Kim Hagel, host of the Joyful Movement Show. And on Instagram, I'm at Radiant Vitality Wellness.
Hey everyone, it's Jolyn Martin of Jolyn Martin Fitness. So I'm on Instagram, Jolyn Martin Fitness, and all of the social media platforms. And I host the podcast, The Non-Diet Mom Show.
And hello, I am Stephanie Bender. I am a SPEN on Instagram and a non-diet PT personal trainer at Good Life here in Kitchener.
Yes, beautiful. So you have four of us here today, and it's going to be kind of a group panel discussion style. And you can hear obviously this episode on all of our podcasts today. So the idea of if you have little ones around, I should say we might have some swear words today. So maybe grab your headphones. But the idea with this episode of fuck joyful movement.
First F bomb.
Yeah, first F bomb. Um, kind of came into my head in my own journey because it gave me a little bit of momentum and it gave me permission to engage in body movement without feeling joy. Like it started to feel like too much pressure. And so the women here today they've all played a role in my own healing and recovery. So Stephanie, like she's on Instagram. I love seeing your videos where you're like lifting weights and you just look like a total badass. You look so strong. And I've definitely done work with both Kim and Joanne. And so these are like three badass personal trainers that I really enjoy their work. And so I just thought like, let's just get together and talk about this. Okay. So firstly, Kim likes to start, like you usually start your podcast off with like, what does joyful movement mean to you?
Yeah.
And so I thought it would be fun to go, what comes to your head or what does it mean to you when I say fuck joyful movement?
Well, I can go first since it's like the question, my question. And I love that. I also just give you kudos for coming up with this idea for a podcast because I think it's brilliant. And I think it's a message that can really help a lot of women who struggle with the whole idea of joyful movement. So when I hear fuck joyful movement, I think that, yeah, movement isn't always joyful. And not even for those of us who are in the industry of movement, right? There are times where it's not this, or there can be this connotation, I guess, with the whole joyful movement idea that it's this blissed out nirvana experience where you're like having that runner's high phenomena all the time, every time you move your body, and that should be the goal of movement. And if we're not getting that, then we're doing something wrong. And like you say, there can be all of this pressure. So yeah, I am looking forward to the opportunity to dismantle that and kind of take the pressure off, because that's when there's pressure, like we're getting further and further away from joy.
I loved what you said with that, Kim, too, and how we can get into an all or nothing mindset even when it comes to joyful movement. Because, on the other spectrum, it's almost like we've just flipped the table and there's almost this like toxic anti-diet culture now happening here where it's like it's all about, it has to be yoga or like gentle movements, eating donuts and not eating like salads. Like it's almost like this opposite thing going on. And what we're trying to do is ditch that all or nothing mindset on both sides, right? So yeah, I don't know.
It's so true. And I think like, when we think about rejecting the diet mentality, it really is trying to release ourselves from that perfectionism mindset or that all or nothing thinking, like you said. And if we're not careful, we can move, I think, into this, like you said, toxic positivity sort of place.
Mhm.
And so when this phrase came into my head, like I said, for me, it gave me permission to move my body and actually accept what emotion was present at the time
Mm.
rather than I'm doing this wrong because I don't feel joy, or maybe this isn't for me because I don't feel joy. And something, with this idea is we have this body image spectrum, right? Where it's kind of this body violence, body hatred. And to jump to body acceptance, body love, body respect. It can feel so far out of reach for women, especially when there's eating disorder background or trauma. And I thought like exercise is kind of the same. It's like we cannot move. This is just not how us humans work. We cannot move from a place of exercise hate or just total avoidance of it to joy. That's just not how we work. And so this idea of fuck joyful movement to me is almost moving towards like exercise neutrality for a little while.
Mhm.
Yeah. Love that.
I definitely agree with that part of going from that hatred to neutrality. I love it. And I see it almost in a way of sport. My background exercise wise is a little bit more sporty. So I'm thinking of people searching for joyful movement in relation to a sport. Sometimes people start a sport and they don't think, wow, like this is so fun because you have no skill at it, right? So it's building up the skill to see if you can even find neutrality in it or to find joy in it. You're not going to know if you like this thing by trying it once, right? What do we say to kids? When you try something once, it's that continuous repeated practice of like, okay, do I like this? Is this something that does bring me joy when I start to get the movement, the flow of what's happening? So I love that.
I loved what you just said, Steph. And something that came to my head is, one of the things I talk about with clients in my group, and I know all of you talk about, is like, what movement did you enjoy or like as a child before diet culture stole that, And when you said that, I was thinking like, yeah, because when I first rode a bike and then like fell over and scraped my knee, I wasn't like, that was awesome. Let's do it again. It was like this whole process of, trying again and being compassionate and being curious and then giving myself space to learn and see how it feels. So that what you just said, I love it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of messaging in our society that it's like, it's not okay to be a beginner and it's not okay to make mistakes. So that leads to the whole belief that I should be an expert when I start. It should be easy and I should love it right off the bat, right? That's where we don't leave that room to, like you say, Steph, like get to like try the thing and see if you actually enjoy it, right? Build that skill set from a neutral place first. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. There's that fear that's behind showing up as a newbie to these things, especially as adults, right? You don't want to show someone that you're an adult trying something new. It can be scary. So learning to give that compassion in that space, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think one of the things I often say is when we hear shoulds, that's usually an indicator that there's some self-judgment going on or some judgment of the experience. So Ken, when you said I should, be good at this or I should feel this way, that's the judgment. And if we can back away with a little bit of curiosity of actually accepting what is, and one of the judgments that I think not only like I have to be good at this, or to me, I know this sounds strange, but there was a lot of shame around sweating. Like, like even that would be like because I enjoy hiking and like going up a hill, the beginning of this journey for me, there would be so much judgment because it would be like, I should be fitter. I shouldn't like be dripping with sweat, and that judgment and that should, where again, it's kind of just accepting and learning and looking at our thoughts of like, but it's kind of normal to sweat when we're going up a hill. And it's actually a great way that your body protects you from like overheating.
Right.
Yeah.
It's funny because in the gym that I used to work at, it was all about sweating. So like it was encouraged and praised to like sweat every day. Like it was just like this was like the golden ticket to a good workout. So it's really funny. That's like the kind of the opposite messaging that was out there.
Yeah. Yeah. No pain, no gain,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It also just kind of goes to show that how our perspective and our beliefs about ourselves and our beliefs about exercise can shape where that self-judgment comes in, right? Because like you say, Jolene, if you're deep in fitness culture, then yeah, sweating is like a badge of honor and getting out of breath is like something to be proud of. It means you're pushing yourself. But I mean, I've seen lots of clients who really judge themselves when they get out of breath or when their body hurts, or when they sweat, and they think that this means I'm out of shape and I'm not good enough and I can't do these things and therefore I shouldn't continue. It's all that perspective and what we bring to the fitness environment.
Y- Even with yoga, it's something that's really supported me like emotionally and mentally. And when I say yoga, it's so easy to think of it in diet culture style of like I have like expensive Lululemon and I have like the cutest mat and I'm in a studio and we're all just like thin and white and doing everything perfectly, right? Not my style, not reality, but I like roll up with like dirty t-shirts and shorts and like no bra and I'm like on my living room floor and I can't find my mat, so I'm just doing it on a rug, so it's like kind of giving us ourselves permission for it to be outside of that like perfection, that like that narrow view of what we've been taught, and even the judgment thing of, and I think this is what helps us move towards neutrality is like, tell me if you guys have been here, but being in a yoga class, especially where there's other people around you and they're like, and if you want, you can like add this part. For me, in my diet culture days, I would add it even if it hurt, even if I knew my body didn't like it, because I felt like I have to do it and I have to squeeze and I have to tense and it has to be intense, Um, where again, it's just coming back to permission to engage with it in a way that suits your body best at that time. And that's probably going to change each day anyway.
Yeah. It's hard to honor those needs in the typical fitness environments the way that they're set up right now to be so competitive and judgy, right? And I think the landscape's changing a little bit in that regard. I don't want to paint everybody with that brush, but I've certainly felt that need to compete and push myself to make sure that I measure up with everybody else in the room. So you're not alone in that.
I think that's why I love having you all on and finding out who else is in the non-diet space, because it really is a whole different mentality of engaging with body movement. Because yeah, I still wouldn't go to a gym, I don't think. I I do lots of work in my my husband is just like a fix-it man. He's just like Bob the Builder over here. So he has like over COVID just created this gym space in the garage. Um, Very privileged to have that, but that's what's there. So even where I'm at in my own journey, I'm like, I don't even know if I could step into the gym space yet because of what you just said, Kim. I don't
Mm.
want the signs about my pre-baby body. I don't want the signs of the weight loss challenge. I don't want a trainer yelling at me to make up for what I ate on the weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm in a commercial gym space and hearing it is challenging, right? It's also a great space for me to educate other coaches on how to look at things differently. So I see it as challenging, but also like a great opportunity to just spread the message.
How receptive do you find that, just kind of in general, that people at the gym are to that message?
Um, when you can, speak to people about how movement makes them feel and how that's really like the important piece, and they get it, like they can kind of flash back to moments of joy that they have felt with movement, and maybe not moments of joy, but like understanding how they felt when moving their bodies. There is receptiveness. There is also people who are just purely there just to change the aesthetics, right? So there's a combination for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, does anybody feel okay sharing a little bit about your own process with movement? I thought we could all say a little bit about that. Who wants to go first?
Sure, I can go. So, I think, yeah, it resonated when you were saying, Vanessa, about before diet culture hijacked our joyful movement. As a child, it was all about gymnastics and baseball, and like I had a great relationship with movement. It was my joy, right? And I think over the years, I started to get into, well, I guess you're just bombarded with messages, right? So I remember using exercise um as punishment for eating. So I've mentioned this in my own podcast, just um Christmas Day evening, I remember because I had too much, in quotes, dessert or too much food, I would be out in the garage putting on like an insanity video or like some kind of video, um, and just trying to burn calories was my intention because I felt guilty. And so exercise for me for many, many years was guilt driven, shame driven, very much a punishment mindset that if I didn't do this, then, you know, I'm the worst thing that could happen to me would be keeping weight on. That was like in my head, that was the worst thing. And so over the course of many, many years, having babies, my body changing and stuff, it was actually, I don't, like I was kind of saying to you guys, there wasn't like an aha moment for me, but I knew postpartum getting back into moving my body again, being part of a community of women, like that was everything for me. Just having that time to myself and really feeling good mentally, feeling good physically after each workout. And I was like, okay, this is awesome. This is what was the drive for me to become a personal trainer was I want everyone to know that it doesn't have to be like this punishment, you know, and then there starts the story of like entering the conventional gym and seeing the toxic stuff behind the scenes. But initially the drive was from that intention.
Yeah.
I can go next. So I did not have a great relationship with movement growing up. I was never good at sports. I was not, I was just, I think I've talked on my show before about how I was the last kid that was picked for every sports team. And even in my school that only had 9 girls in it, I would still get cut from all the sports teams. I mean, I liked riding my bike and things like that, but I think even from an early age, I developed the belief that that wasn't good enough. And like, because I wasn't good at sports, like I placed a lot of value on that. So I just shied away from anything physical. So, um, where movement, I guess, entered my life and where I kind of first discovered joyful movement was after I'd had my third child. And instead of trying to diet to lose weight, I hired a personal trainer instead because I was fed up with dieting at that time. Um, and that was the first time in my life that I really did anything physical. And like in learning how to move my body with someone who is, really empowering and, right there with me and supportive. I was like, "Oh my gosh, like I'm strong, I'm powerful. This feels good." Like it felt good to be in my body. And like Jolynn, that's what motivated me to become a personal trainer. Um, but it very quickly morphed into something really disordered because my body did start to change and I got a lot of validation for that. So then, exercise became this way to control my body and try to find approval, both my own approval and that of others, and also to prove something to myself and everybody else who ever picked on me and cut me from the sports teams growing up. Right. So, yeah. So, exercise for the longest time was, like Jolynn said, all about burning calories, all about shaping my body. I was really fixated on getting a six pack, never did find it even at my even at my lowest weight. Um, and that was fine until it didn't work anymore. Right. And we all reached that point where, we know that intentional weight loss is not sustainable long term for anyone. And that happened to me. And then I had all of this dissonance in my brain of like, "Oh, well, I don't belong in this industry then, right? If I can't maintain that like perfect personal trainer persona, like chiseled and cut and, the best at everything, then I don't belong here." So I actually left for a couple of years and it was I don't know, I guess I just sort of fell into joyful movement. I didn't even know that's what it was, but I just sort of started moving my way, um, doing the things that I enjoyed and wanted to do. And it wasn't until I kind of learned about the whole intuitive eating side of things and the non-diet world that I was like, "Oh, you can move for more than like body shaping and weight loss. Like that was it was a whole unlearning. I was like, it hadn't even ever crossed my mind, even as a personal trainer, that there were other reasons why I would want to move and that it could be fun and it could be joyful. So it was a whole evolution and unlearning.
Yeah. I love the word evolution. Can I ask, how you said when you started to recognize, okay, the deeper why behind body movement could be outside of aesthetics, or weight loss. What did you engage in where you went like, oh, I kind of like this?
Mhm. It took a while. Like there was a long period there where I was not very active because I couldn't kind of disconnect my why from burning calories. And so I kind of took the approach that like if it's in my brain that I'm doing this workout for calorie burning or weight loss, I'm just not gonna do it. Like so I shied away from a lot for a while. But then um gradually started doing things because I realized it was a great way to clear my mind, right? So exercise became about not exercise, movement in general became about like having time to myself, being in my body, clearing my head, like um and I found that like I would have this clarity of thought after I moved my body that I might otherwise not have, right? I'd try to sit down with my journal and figure out what was going in my brain and I couldn't do it. And then I'd go out for a walk or a run and I'd come back and like, oh, everything makes so much sense now.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
my yeah. So that's my big why for movement now.
Yeah. And I think that space, this is where the fuck joyful movement I hope can be helpful, because that space between recognizing the way I'm engaging in this is not working for me anymore,
Mhm.
to that space of I enjoy parts of this, or it helps clear my mind, or it reduces stress, or I actually have that longing. I like how you talk about Kim craving movement.
Mm,
That space between those is where I want to invite women and
mm,
give them today some ideas of like, how do you navigate that space? Because I don't see it talked about enough. It feels like diet culture movement, or the other side of the spectrum of like intuitive eating, joyful movement. And so
mhm.
that's kind of like, and something you said is like, and in my own is permission to not do it.
Yeah.
Like it, and that, like that part in that space for me was so stressful
Mm.
for a while because of my internalized fat phobia, because of some other fears and anxieties. So, but I think the more work I do in this area from like the mental and emotional perspective, especially, is permission to not. And sometimes just releasing that pressure means we're probably more likely to engage in it.
Well, yeah, and it's in that permission that you rebuild body trust, right? Just as we have to do with our relationship to food, like when everything's always been micromanaged and you follow a set of rules and you distrust your hunger and fullness and satisfaction cues, we do the same with movement and we engage in it for all the wrong reasons, right? So when you can just give yourself permission to not do it, then you're open to reconnecting with your body and listening to those internal cues. Like I say, the movement cravings, right? I just had this conversation with a woman the other day, and she was really feeling guilty because she wants to feel better. She wants to improve her health, and she knows that movement would help her, but there's the pressure. Like I should do it. If I care about myself and I want to feel better, I should do this. But then there's all the guilt and the shame and like, but she doesn't want to. So we had this whole conversation about giving yourself permission to not do it, to sit with your body and ask, body, what do you need today? And if body says, I want to read a book. And the more you honor that need or those cravings of your body to rest, I do believe that eventually those cravings for movement will start to come back too, right? Just as when we're doing intuitive eating, we might eat a lot of chocolate at the beginning. But as you rebuild that body trust, your body's gonna start asking for celery and apples and things too, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's going to learn like, this is not, especially as women, this is not another thing in my freaking life that I am forced or pressured to do. Like it's that I love how you said that of yeah, the space to build trust and honor what it needs. And in my own journey with all of this, that is something that helped a lot, even though it was not comfortable. That's the thing too. I'll say to listeners, not always comfortable, not always unicorns and rainbows. So this is also having to sit with the uncomfortable emotions that come up. Yeah.
Thank you guys so much for sharing. I think I resonated so much with Jolyn and Kim's stories, just in different areas. So I'll get into mine. I was very active as a kid, so I played lots of sports, and it was purely for having fun and learning the skills. So that was really great. And then I got into the gym, and it at first was a form of to like change my body. And then that slowly dissipated, and I started using it actually as a form of mental clarity, like go release energy, then I could come back and do schoolwork and focus. And that was super effective, which was great. Eventually leading into using exercise, like noticing that exercise changed the way that my body looked. I was like, oh, great. Like, let's actually do this and do a bodybuilding competition. So I purely used it to change the way that my body looked, which then messes with your head quite a bit. This desire to be this lean all around, or this belief that, I'm a better person at this leaner state because I got more validation from other people. I wanted that, right? Just kind of like Kim was saying, you get this validation from other people as they see your body changing. You start to believe that like you are better in this body. You will get more attention. You will get more validation. So that was challenging for sure. And exercise became no fun for me anymore from there. And so I had to find another way of how can I be consistent with this? Because the reason was to still change my body. Like I still wanted to change my body, but I shifted towards strength training. Thinking if I focused on what's my strength like, I am going to be consistent, but still with the purpose of changing my body. So that worked, air quotes, to keep me consistent for a while, and enjoyed the strength pieces and did quite well with increasing my strength in powerlifting. So I got into that sport. After a while, I started thinking, how can I be better at the sport? How can I show up and be better? Again, is this a validation thing that I was looking for from other people? Probably. Thinking then, if I cut weight, I can essentially have a better ratio of how much weight I lifted compared to my body weight. So that became disordered again. And then started to kind of realize that that was the way that things were going, but didn't really want to change it. Thought it was fine and we're just going to keep doing it because at least I'm consistently exercising. And then let's go back a couple of years. Over COVID, it was utilizing exercise in a response to eating. It was, I shouldn't have, here's the shouldn't have, as Vanessa was talking about. I shouldn't have eaten this, so let's exercise. Let's go run. Using cardio as the source of reducing the amount of calories that I ate, if you will. So there was a whirlwind of exercise in there. So that was my journey of movement. And just a year and a half ago, there was this realization that this relationship was unhealthy. And so my body told me that it was unhealthy. I couldn't exercise without getting pain. So I didn't give myself that space to stop exercising. My body told me I had to. And so it was very challenging for sure. And from there, as I slowly was like, I know I want to get back into it. I need to give myself space to not go back at it full force. And this is where using the joyful movement really came back in. And I started playing hockey again. I started playing basketball again, stuff that I stopped doing when I was going to the gym because I believed the movement needed to be in the gym. I didn't think I could move outside of the gym for it to count as movement. So started bringing that back into life, more of the sporty stuff that I used to do as a kid, and then slowly got back into the strength training purely for mental health reasons of the way that it makes me feel and how productive I can be after that movement. So yeah.
It's interesting because the whole external validation can be such a factor in this. I think at least a couple of you mentioned that and that's the tricky part is we can be almost like socially rewarded for disordered eating or disordered movement.
Yeah.
And so when we're talking about unpacking this a bit, it really is reflecting on that need for external validation. And that's been pretty freeing for me of learning to let go of that. Not an overnight process. I still want my husband to tell me I'm hot, but it's but it's like, but still kind of thinking of like whose opinion actually matters. And yeah, and you know, something like I was thinking in my life, exercise was so closely linked to shame and failure. Like it was so wrapped up. Like I should say as a child, I was like played sports, I played basketball and softball. And I loved being like I was like the only girl at recess playing kickball with all the boys. You know, I really loved it riding bikes. But like I said, I feel like there was this point where diet culture kind of stole that from me. But the almost like the repeated, this is what I see too of like we engage in something and then it like reinforces a core belief. And it's so heartbreaking. So it's like I've done another challenge and I failed in some way, which means I'm a failure. And it kind of just like this loop keeps going. And so I for me, exercise was so tied up with weight loss and even body image. You know how we say this, like body image is in your mind. It's not going to be fixed on the scale. But for a long time, I had that misconception in my head. So there were lots of times where I would be at the end of some challenge and kind of be going like, well, I'm at my smallest or near smallest, but it's still not good enough. And so exercise being a part of that whole cycle, this is why it was too tricky to go like, well, let's just enjoy something. And it made me so angry seeing people say that everywhere on social media, being like joyful movement, hashtag, you know, like peace sign. And I'm like, guys, I can't do that because it's so intensely linked with all of this like disordered stuff. And so yeah, I think, and a couple of you know this, but I was doing like a form of super intense exercise, and I was in such denial. I was like, I love it. It makes me feel better. But I really, like, you peel back the layers, and it was like, this is about weight loss. This is about shame. This is about failing. Yeah. So I had to stop that. And that was very hard. I had to stop that form of exercise, give myself permission to rest, and then start to experiment. Like, experiment from a place of just curiosity. Like, I wonder what this class will be like, or I wonder what this YouTube video will be like, or I wonder what this kind of stretching feels like. And so, more curiosity for a long time rather than joy, you know? Jolene, did you have something come into your head?
Oh, yeah. When you were just talking about being in denial, it made me think, and I don't know if you find this working with clients, Stephanie or Kim, when you ask someone what movement they enjoy, it's not as easy as a simple answer because people believe that something that they actually hate is something that they should be liking. So they'll say that they like that. And I even remember in my own life, when I was running for weight loss, and then a trainer told me, oh, running's not going to help you lose weight. Strength training is. And instantly I stopped liking running. And it's because I thought that I liked running because I thought I was losing weight doing it. You know what I mean? So I don't know if you guys have found that, but I find asking someone, what do you enjoy? It's not as easy as a simple answer.
Mhm.
I totally agree with you, Jolyn, on that. The denial piece that you said there, Vanessa, instantaneously, I thought about the Stairmaster. And I will
Love that.
I feel that thing like, I don't know, way too often. And it's like the best piece of cardio, air quotes over that, because like it's so intense. I haven't touched the Stairmaster since my joyful movement journey. And like I look at it and I'm gonna go, I'm gonna walk right past you. Like I'd rather do burpees. We're gonna hear Kim's story about burpees.
Like, you're crazy.
I love burpees. Like I love them. Like, but the Stairmaster, don't, no way, absolutely not.
So
I
funny.
think I think as well, Jolene, like how you said, you ask someone what they like to do. Yeah, they, like it's confusing. Something I like to ask my clients more so is like, what don't you like? Like, we're in the gym, we are in that setting. At the end of each program, like, I mean, throughout the program, I'll ask too, but at the end of each program, it's like, I want to know what you didn't like. Tell me what was, awful, or what just didn't, you didn't feel excited to practice. So I find it's a lot easier for people to find what they don't like than what they do like if there is that challenge within the movement.
Mm. When you were saying that, something that came to my head is in the therapy world, when I'm trying to suss out like what coping skills someone has or what hobbies, most women don't know because they are so up to their eyeballs with all the expectations that everyone has on them. They're meeting the needs of everyone around them and leaving very, very little time for giving themselves permission to engage in any sort of self-care or enjoyable activity. So I think this taps into what Ken was saying, Ken, with your client, of the bigger question for a little while. Like the umbrella over this can be like tuning into overall, what do I like and dislike? Because it's amazing how many adults don't know. So going like, well, I like reading, I like laying in my hammock, sort of honoring those. And then I think integrating movement into that.
And taking the pressure off of like and don't like too. Like if you're not sure,
Yes.
like okay, how about neutral? Or how about just intentional? Like that's um I feel like intentional movement is a great bridge towards or between hating movement and joyful movement. Like how can we just be intentional about it? Like how do you want to feel, or what are you looking to improve in your health or your functional fitness, and how can we be intentional about moving towards that? And if the joy isn't there right away, there's nothing wrong with that. And like you said too, Vanessa, like holding space for the anger. I wanted to come back to the anger. Like it's okay. It's a natural response to feel angry if your relationship to exercise has been disordered or punitive. So allowing that to be what it is, and also it can be an opportunity to channel it. Like movement is a great way to process emotions. So if we can just take the pressure off and let our body move the way that it wants to move. There's lots of great ways that you can channel that anger through movement, right? And when we tap into our body and become embodied, we can do that, right? Like our body will tell us what it needs. Like maybe you want to stomp around and like, or jump up and down or throw some heavy weights around or sprint down the street. I don't know, but there's like lots of ways that you can move that anger through, and it's okay to have that feeling.
That is such a good point of helping it process emotions, helping it calm, the nervous system, relieve stress. With the idea of the anger, this is from Glennon Doyle's book, Untamed. And she talks about emotions being messengers. And I might read a little bit like an excerpt from that book, but especially around exercise and body movement, the anger is potentially letting us know that the way we've engaged in this is not consistent with our value system
Oh.
And there's something about maybe integrity in there. And I was thinking like anger is part of the grieving process. Like if you look at the stages of grief. And so I think even that of there can be grief in this of what's been stolen, how I've been conditioned to think about exercise, maybe there can just be grief. And part of moving through grief is allowing the anger. And so Glennon Doyle talks about almost like emotions being like a package delivered at your door. and and you can ignore it. And then you're gonna have a shitload of packages at your door that you're like, now this is a lot. Or, she talks about you can open the door and kind of be like, okay, what is this? Be curious about it. Even if you're not clear on the message, you can still say curious about what it is and acknowledge it. And that's part of processing the emotion of anger too. So it's kind of getting that physical movement, if that feels possible, but this like acknowledging it. This is what she said. So she says, anger delivers important information about where one of our boundaries has been crossed.
Mm.
When we answer the door and accept that delivery, we begin to know ourselves better. When we restore the boundary that was violated, we honor ourselves. When we know ourselves and honor ourselves, we live with integrity, peace, and power, understanding that we are the kind of woman who will be wise and brave enough to care for herself. Like, how good is that? And I think that's where some of the anger comes from of like, deep down, we know we've crossed a boundary.
Mm. That makes so much sense. So can I ask you this question? When the anger comes up for you around movement, what boundary do you think was crossed?
I think it was like, I refer to my body as her now because it just like help. It just, I don't know, it just brings in so much more, I think, compassion. But I think the boundary that crossed was that like I was being abusive to her. And I know abusive is a like a loaded word, but that is what it is. It was emotionally abusing her. It was physically abusing her. And all has done is allow me to breathe, allow me to hug my child, allow me to smell the saltiness of the ocean, allow me to hug my partner. So despite all of that abuse, she is still just kind of ticking away. And I think the boundary was that. And that little voice that we can ignore only so long. So like how Steph said, like, my body, honey, she told me I can't keep doing this. And I think that's what happens is she will whisper and then she gets louder and then she gets louder until we're almost kind of forced to stop. What about you guys? Like if we think of it like that, was there a boundary in there that was crossed?
I think for me, it was a disconnect. Like that's the bound. I cut myself off from my body, and I don't know that that's exactly a boundary, but I think that was my wake up call. Uh,
That makes total sense, Ken, of like
yeah,
the boundary of I kind of like abandoned myself and disconnected.
yeah, that's it. Yeah, you put good words to that. Yeah, abandon myself. Hmm.
I think I'd have to agree that like that's kind of where I would say I would be as well, like abandoning my true self, getting back into my body has been like an authenticity journey. So this part of doing movement because I believed it needed to be in the gym versus taking like my authentic joy of sports that pulled me away from that because I believed it needed to be in a gym. So there'd be this like anger towards it in the gym. Outside of the gym, I loved moving still.
So the message for you from the anger, this runs so deep. Of course, like my therapist brain is going wild right now. But like part of the anger was for you kind of like the message was, can you please expand your view of what this exercise or body movement is? Like you can be out of the gym, you can reconnect to that like younger you that loved feeling like strong and sporty.
Yeah. And I could love myself still with that, right? Like there was the lack of love that I gave myself. And I was like, oh, you know what? You can still give yourself that love if you're not in the gym. You know, you probably give yourself more if you're not there.
You're still worthy of love.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jolene, what's happening?
Yeah, no, because just kind of what you were saying really brought to mind. I've shared the story before a couple times to different people, but I think back to my child and my child version of myself, and I remember certain moments where moving my body, I started to realize it means something different for adults. And I my first memory of this was I was 11 years old at the zoo, and I remember eating my friend and I went with her mom, and we were begging for the funnel cakes. It smells so good. You're walking past,
My gosh,
know,
okay.
right? And so we like begged her mom, and the three of us shared a funnel cake, and her mom said, "With all these calories, we're gonna have to walk home." And I remember not really understanding at that point. I was 11 years old and I didn't really understand what she meant by that, but I knew that I knew in my body that we had done something wrong, that I didn't quite know what it was yet, but I felt like, oh, we did something wrong by eating this funnel cake, almost like there was a negative connotation to moving our body or like for walking home. And then I, even as Steph was talking there just about like the compassion, the love, and it brought back another memory for me of my gym teacher, elementary school, saying that he works out so much because he likes to eat. And again, making this connection of like, oh, if you like to eat, you have to work out or you have to exercise. Like, and so I think when I came to like years now down the road in my 30s, I finally came to realize that it doesn't have to be about what I thought exercise meant for adults. It's like I've come back to my child. I've come back to that little girl who loved to do gymnastics. And, I think about my own daughter and I never want her to get this message that moving our bodies has to be punishment or we have to do it to earn food. So I don't know what maybe I'm not explaining what the boundary was, but it felt like a weight was lifted off my shoulders being like, oh, I can go, like, I feel safe again. I feel like I can be authentic again. I can move my body and not think it's not, like you're saying, like it's not a gym. That's okay. Like I can move my body in other ways. That feels really good.
I mean, that boundary to me is like so powerful because it is the boundary of like returning home to like little Joanne and being like, honey, we can reject these messages that we've been given and come back to our own truth. And, as I listen to you, to all of you talk, I was thinking joyful movement, like joy. Maybe it's not so much about the having to be like happy, like the emoji where he's like blowing the like birthday hat and stuff. Doesn't necessarily have to be that. But I think it's more something of like slowly returning home to ourselves and our truth, And so it's something I wanted to ask, okay, so I think we've given through our own stories, ideas, but like, what are some ways you would recommend women who are going like, that is me, like what's helped in your own story, what you see helps your clients? And the other thing I just wanted to bring in on this part too is lots of women I work with have had eating disorders and they do have a history of trauma. And so rather than exercise being like they've done it and they've gone hard and it's intense and they've been in the gym and they're kind of coming from that way, they're actually kind of sitting at the other end where it's like, no matter how much I want to move, like Kim's client, I think like no matter how much I want to move and I know it's healthy and I know it's good for my body, I just can't. And so I think keeping that, like if someone's listening and that's kind of where they are, just kind of keeping that in our minds too of what's helped. What do you suggest? It's a huge question, but yeah, does anything come up?
Um, I think for me, like the practice of embodiment has helped a lot. Like that practice of reconnecting to my body. And that's the big thing I really try to teach my clients is I always give them 3 questions that they can do at the beginning of any movement session or just any time in general. But how do I feel today? And how do I want to feel today? And how could I move to get closer to that feeling? And then that goes back to that unconditional permission that any option is okay.
I,
And like expand the definition of movement to include rest and meditation and anything in between that and sprinting and heavy weightlifting.
yeah, I love those questions because it's kind of it's acknowledging what is
Mhm.
and it's creating an intention. I like that. And what you said too is in this, all movements welcome. It doesn't have to, I think, Jolene, you said at the beginning, especially when it comes to intuitive eating on social media, it tends to be this like yoga, gentle walking, which is all great, but equally, depending on our thoughts behind it and our motives, equally doing something more intense. Like sometimes in the day between client sessions, I'll just like run up and down the stairs for a few minutes just to like get my body moving and kind of like just release some of the energy so it can kind of be just so many movement options.
So
So,
many. So many.
um,
That abundance based mindset, right? Like we have to move out of this narrow focus of what exercise or movement needs to look like. It's an abundant way to move our bodies.
yeah.
I think from a mom's perspective, and I've heard this feedback from another mom client of mine, reframing that word. I know we've talked this a lot tonight. Personally, I use exercise and movement typically interchangeably, but that's based on my relationship with that word. But exercise for a lot of people has a very negative connotation. But I've heard from clients that just making that shift to the word movement was radical because as moms, we move all day long. We are moving up and down the stairs with laundry and, we're going to the grocery store and our body is getting movement and that's all our bodies need. Our bodies don't need exercise or this like, stereotypical idea of exercise. So I just wonder if people listening today can recognize that any type of moving our bodies, even if it's a stretch, is self-care, is health promoting behavior, like is,
I love
going to
that
benefit.
because it's kind of coming from, it's not a deficit model. It's more like what movement am I already doing? And almost to me, like giving yourself recognition and recognizing that. So, like you said, and yes, especially the moms listening with little ones, like, my gosh, like it's just so much lifting and moving and jumping around. And
Yeah. And I mean, going back to that whole mindset of sweat every day, like that was one that I wrestled with for a long time. And maybe this is too much information, but I don't sweat very easily. That's just my body. Everybody's body's so different. So for me, that was always like I didn't push myself as like I would have been at the end of like a Taibo workout and I would maybe not be sweating, but I'd certainly feel exhausted and I'd feel like because of that messaging that I didn't get enough of a workout. So even when I first learned this kind of concept, it was like, oh my gosh, like I don't need to earn this whatever idea or whatever belief I have about movement. I don't need to earn that because I am doing lots. My body's getting movement. Coming up and down the stairs. I have 2 flights of stairs in my house. That's a lot of movement.
that is, yes, yes. I think Kim, maybe we'll put it in the show notes because you did an episode where you talked about some of Brene Brown's work and using gratitude to foster joy, or even like just inviting in that that gratitude, whatever that looks like in the moment when we're moving. So even if it is something as routine as walking up the stairs with a laundry basket or and I know people have different limits too. I should say that. Like I know people have different limits around mobility and movement, but just gratitude of, like I said, what that looks like for you, of any small thing that we can just take a moment and go, hey, I'm kind of thankful for this. And the other thing is, and sometimes diet culture steals this, but diet culture does not get to own this. Like finding a deeper why. Um, for me, I started like I love strength training now. I legitimately love it. And but part of the deeper why is like I'm super adventurous and I want to travel and I want to like see different places. And I know that especially as I age, having that strength will hopefully, we're not in control 100%, but hopefully help me be able to do that.
Mhm.
Um, one last thing I'll say is when it comes to trauma informed work around this, starting as small and as gradual as you need to. So if it's someone sitting at that end of, I know this is good for me, but I just can't seem to get there, then literally 1 minute stretch and just kind of reconnecting and noticing what that feels like and then move on. And so kind of like giving yourself permission to build slowly back into um, your body. Yeah.
That
I think that's great. That's moving slowly back into your body. I think kind of links into what I was about to say of having zero expectations around the movement of when you're going back in slowly. Like there's no, I'm gonna move my body 3 days a week or whatever that like goal setting that you might do when you're more in diet culture. So zero expectations around how long you're going to move, zero expectations around what the movement is, right? Being able to truly pause in your moment and be like, what is it that would feel good for my body today? Or, like having like a list of different movement ideas, checking in like, oh, am I sore in my hips? Maybe stretching is a good idea today, rather than, oh, my workout program says I need to squat today, so that's what I'm going to do. So setting that like not low expectation, but like a zero expectation for what it um, is a big thing. I think that was super effective for me and for clients, especially now with this lockdown that we have going on, the gyms being closed, has been great for my clients as well. Something that I love is finding that movement that feels empowering to you and being able to utilize that, even if maybe, let's call the movement a chin up, for example. And we're going to go gym style here. Um, a chin up might feel empowering, but there might be other movements that can help strengthen your chin up. And I think this is where we go back to what Kim was saying with intentional movement of like, there's other movements that can help strengthen that movement that you might start to practice because you know that, hey, that's going to help with that movement. And you can feel that gratitude like, hey, you know what? I'm doing some bicep work today. I'm super grateful for like having the strength in my arms to be able to help build this empowering movement of the chin up.
I love that. Something you said, Stephanie, made me think of I still think after so many years of women that are probably listening that we've dieted and we've engaged in disordered stuff, like that doesn't just magically go away, but we can get better at like externalizing the thoughts and then really choosing intentionally whether we want to act on them. And so I have this part that she just will pop up sometimes in yoga. It happened this morning where it was like, you know what? I'm going to do yoga 5 times a week. And then maybe I'll be a yoga instructor and then I'll do this. And it's like, I know that part tends to pop up. And now it's just like so much compassion for her where I can just go, honey, look, I know you're excited, but like, we don't have to turn this into, like we don't have to turn it into that. And so kind of having compassion if that part of us does still surface, treating that part with respect, but ultimately sort of teaching that part of us the message that no, this can just be a one-time thing. This can be flexible. I don't have to do the chin-ups today. I can just do the strength part of preparing, training up to that,
Yeah.
Yeah. So before we finish, I wanted to get Kim your burpee experience because I don't know this. I have to hear it.
Well, I think maybe it's a great story to finish on, just to kind of to give you hope that if movement makes you angry right now, or if you don't love it, that there's hope for a different relationship. Burpees were always my, I guess, punishment move. Like they were I hate them. I know you like them, Stephanie, but I've always hated them. And they were like the thing you did to burn the calories, and like the harder the better. And like, if you're going to do one, you might as well do 100. And anyway, hated them. And when I started changing my relationship with movement, I swore off burpees. I was like, okay, joyful movement to me means never having to do a burpee ever again.
I love this.
And the weirdest thing happened a few weeks ago. I was doing a little workout myself in my little studio. I was working on some balance with my Bosu ball, which for those who don't know what a Bosu ball is, it's like flat on the bottom and then it's like a bubble on top. And it's a great way to like train balance, which is something that I'm consciously trying to work on. So I was doing that. And then I found myself taking the Bosu ball and I set it on the floor. And I very mindfully stepped back into a plank and did a little baby push-up. And then I stepped back and I lifted up the ball and I put it over my head. And I was like, what the hell? I just did a burpee. And then I did a few more and I did a few more. And I was like, oh my gosh, when I break this movement down and really think about each of the parts and like how it helps me build core strength and how it helps with my hip mobility and helps with like shoulder stability and, of working on my push-up. And like, there was so much function to that movement. I was like, I'm gonna put these in my program every now and then. And but I don't think, at least at this point in my journey, will I ever do a big jumping, like explosive burpee. That doesn't feel good in my body. But it just kind of made me realize like, oh, things can change and they can evolve. And something that was so hateful and anger provoking can become something that feels really good too.
I love that story. And it's such a good story to demonstrate what we've talked about, like the evolution. Like it might be this doesn't work for me now, but it might be later. I have appreciation for this movement. And so something else is, I just want to say is when you're learning about what works, what doesn't, what feels neutral, what, all of this stuff we've talked about too, is thinking about the environment too. That can be important. You're probably like, it will serve you if what we've said resonates to work with one of three of you, like what you do, right? Like this non-diet trainer who understands the stuff we're talking about, or thinking like, do I enjoy it more when I'm like with a friend? Is it more like a social connection thing? And so, yeah, I love the burpee story because it shows that evolution. I can just imagine you doing that the first time and being like, what the fuck, Kim?
I think I did say that.
Yeah. Any last parting words?
I just want to make a comment about the burpee story. I think that was great. I think we can look at it like you would never take a burpee, or you would think in a gym, you would never take a burpee and regress it like that. Right? Like you need to go hard. Right. And with permission comes this choice. You're able to break it down and like move it into something that is actually like pleasurable for you. So I think that is just so great to be able to look at, there's movements we might not like. Being able to say, no, never do it again, gave you that choice to break it down. So I thought that was awesome. Thank you for sharing.
That's so important. Choice. We haven't even, I don't know that we've used that word in that way this episode so far, but yes, choice. We are grown ass women. We need autonomy and having the choice and honoring it. Jolynn. What were you?
So one thing I wanted to mention, and I know we've kind of wrestled and tried to talk about this gray area between, you know, hating movement or, fuck joyful movement and then joyful movement and like, that kind of gray zone. One thing I wanted to mention, and this is even in my core value number 4, which I talk about fitness is holistic. I say that although finding joyful movement is essential, not all movement will be easy or comfortable. Self-compassion goes a long way when starting fitness routine and oftentimes challenging ourselves physically rewards us in other areas of life. And so I want to mention this one thing. And I was just having a conversation with someone about this recently. And she was asking me about, but what if you hate something? And although everything we were talking about tonight, having space to notice that when you hate something, you often feel dread. And that is totally my story with stretching. Like I was going to say, like, when it came to stretching, I was thinking about it. I would feel dread because all I would think is, oh, I hate, like, it's not necessary. I just want to get home, like after a workout or whatever. And so my relationship with stretching was so terrible, but then I would feel sore after. And I really had to be mindful about doing the mindset work to become somewhat neutral about it. Because when I think thoughts like now, stretching helps me feel better in the morning, then that creates an emotion of more neutrality. Like I don't feel dread when I think those kind of thoughts. Um, and then when I do it, although I wouldn't say I find joy in stretching, but I tolerate it so that I will feel better in the morning. Do you know what I'm saying? So I just wanted to kind of bring that to light, that concept, that gray area yeah.
Yeah, it's such an important thing. And you said the word tolerate. That is that is essentially what we're doing, is kind of like building our tolerance sometimes for discomfort, for emotions. But we certainly would be looking at, like, what stories am I telling myself about stretching, and can I slowly shift these with some intentional thinking? So it's such a beautiful point to bring up at the end of, like, that's something else that helps, is really looking at what stories, what thoughts you're telling yourself, and kind of leaving some space to shift to different ideas about it, like you just described with stretching. Um, so I was thinking, if anyone has a couple words, that's great. I think this is like a nice point to finish up. And I know Kim is on holiday and she wants her Indian food, and hopefully it's there.
It is. I can smell it.
I'm so hungry. She needs her Indian food. Um, Thank you. Yeah, this was fabulous. Thank you so much, you all.
Oh, thank you for just suggesting that we do this. What a valuable conversation.
Yes.
Such rich conversation here.
Yes, so good.
Thank you so much, Vanessa, for having us on.
Thanks for tuning into the Power in Motion podcast today. If you love what you're learning here, then I invite you to take the next step of embodying these concepts into your own life so that you can live your healthiest, happiest life and never again feel held back by your body. Coaching is the fastest, most efficient pathway to taking what you know in your head to actually applying it and seeing results. Whether you're looking to make changes around movement, food, body image, or all three, I'm here to help you nurture a kind, respectful, and trusting relationship with your body so you can feel your very best. Click the link in the show notes to book a free consultation, and together we'll uncover what's getting in the way of you having the results you want. You'll leave this call knowing exactly what you need to work on, and together we'll explore whether one of my coaching offers is a good fit for you. I can't wait to meet you.